Here's more from the U.S. president answering a question about high prices in the United States linked to the war.
What is the plan to bring them back down?
All I have to do is leave Iran, and we'll be doing that very soon, and they'll become tumbling down. We hit them hard. We got rid of a lot of the radicalized lunatics along the Strait. But if they want something, but I would say that within 2 weeks, maybe 3.
We're going to talk more about Donald Trump's speech tonight with Douglas Herbert, who joins me on the set. Doug, what do we think the U.S. president might say or announce tonight?
You don't have to go that far out on a limb. With this president, he will be essentially making a pre-victory speech. Donald Trump, time and again, when he is put on a back foot, when he is faced with either a failure or evidence that he gravely miscalculated any one of his actions, he tries to flip the narrative and he tries to cement in place another narrative. He is going to lay the groundwork for the American people that this is a victory, essentially, a victory in the making, and it's just a couple of weeks before the U.S. pulls out. And this is coming at a time when his approval ratings, last week they dipped to a low in his presidency, and they're now below around 40%, just below. So they're below water, really, as approval ratings. And what's perhaps more concerning to a lot of the people, perhaps in his immediate inner circle, even if they won't explicitly acknowledge this, is that some of the recent polling shows that the people who supported Trump, one of his big constituencies was young men in the last election in 2024. And even young men who voted in droves for MAGA and Trump world are now, there are signs that they are starting to sour on Donald Trump, and not just over this war, also over issues like the economy, like inflation, like immigration, so on and so forth. So what he's going to say is the opposite of what a lot of people say the evidence and what the reports we've been getting suggest. You know, the former lead negotiator in the Obama era, remember the Obama era nuclear deal, the one that Trump ripped up? The former lead negotiator, a man named Robert Malley, basically said that Trump entered this war, started this war as an unlawful, an unnecessary, and an unjustified war waged on the flimsiest of pretexts. And that essentially this is a president who went to war without really giving reasons to the American people, without really giving them a sense of what this war was about. And ever since then, he's lied about, I will use the word lie even if you don't, even if you want to call it false claims. I'll say he's lied about how the war is going. That is the progress that they are making. So, you know, he says they've 100% destroyed the military in Iran. And yet, where are those weapons still coming from? Where are those missiles still coming from? Iran is still getting missiles off the ground. So if you've destroyed the Navy and Air Force, that apparently isn't working. There are talks going on. Well, what talks? Whom's he talking with? There's been regime change, but not regime change. The son of the former Ayatollah, now in power, who's said to be even more of a hardline person than ever. And meanwhile, the war's winding down, could be over in a couple of weeks, and yet we have troops pouring into the region, ships coming into the region, a massive buildup there, or if not massive, at least thousands and thousands of extra troops. So this war has been about everything and its opposite, and Donald Trump will go before the American people with what I would qualify as a pre-lie to the final lie, which is mission accomplished, a victory in this war.
It'll also be interesting to see what he has to say about NATO. Trump has made no bones about being critical of NATO. And in an interview with The Telegraph, the British newspaper that was published today, he said he's, quote, strongly considering pulling the U.S. out of NATO.
Yeah, this is Donald Trump having a rhetorical temper tantrum. Now, I qualify that, Jeannie. Does that mean that Donald Trump will not perhaps pull the U.S. out of NATO? No, it doesn't mean that. He could very well do it. He could very well not do it. I'm not trying to sit on the fence. It's just that it is impossible to overanalyze Trump because Trump himself doesn't analyze Trump. So when he says this, it really is more a reflection of his inner psyche right now, in the sense that he is furious at what he knows are things not going at least to plan as he thought they would go. He thought this would be an easy war, the same way Vladimir Putin thought that his troops would roll into Kiev, topple the so-called Nazi regime there, in quotes, in a few days. This war hasn't gone. Donald Trump thought his military was going to have similar success in Iran. It didn't. And not only is Iran still there, it is proving to be resilient. These NATO comments are now fury at NATO allies that he has to pass the buck. He has to blame someone for the fact that this war isn't going to plan, that the Strait of Hormuz, which he could deny it till the cows come home, but is an important conduit and is important to the U.S. even if it doesn't get much of its oil from Hormuz because it affects global oil prices. So he has to basically pass on the bucket of blame to someone else. In this case, NATO and Europe are easy targets. They always have been for Donald Trump in this case. And I will just end with the thought that he's been furious at what he sees as Europe rebuffing his request to help him reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Europeans have been very clear about it. It's not about not being allies with the U.S. It's about the fact that this isn't their war, and they certainly don't want to be dragged into a war that they didn't start and never asked for and never wanted. So that is why they weren't, running like lapdogs to Donald Trump when he said, help us reopen the Hormuz Strait. And he is absolutely furious about that. Hence this rhetorical lashing out at NATO. Whether he might do it, he might not. At the end of the day, though, the Europeans are standing firm in this. The UAE, I think, are the only ones who've gone public so far, saying they're willing to go in there, go to the side, and build a coalition alongside the U.S., perhaps to try to open up militarily that Strait of Hormuz. But this is more anger. This is more, I'll go back to that first phrase I used, temper tantrum-ish, a child's temper tantrum, and ramping up the rhetoric at a time when Donald Trump cannot in any way assume responsibility for a possible failure on his part in anticipating the consequences of the war he started.
Doug, thanks for that. France 24's Doug Herbert.